Hey guys, welcome to this episode of Context is King. I'm Rebecca Brayton, and with me as always is CEO and founder of WatchMojo, Ashkan Karbasfrooshan, to discuss, do organizational charts matter?
There should be a show called Mistakes I've Made a Few. A couple of years ago, so when we started the company, I used to think, org charts don't matter for startups. And it's like, come on, I'm good at managing people and culture and communications, yada, yada, yada. So we never had an org chart early on. And I was well aware that it was like, well, Ash, obviously you as a founder, CEO, you don't need an org chart. You could, even if somebody parachutes into a meeting, they may not initially know like who gets final say, but ultimately, like, don't be naive. Like, you are comfortable not having an org chart because you don't need one. So I was always very clear to kind of like explain to new team members, like, oh, this is Raf. He runs day-to-day operations. Listen to him if he says you were going off the train. This is Rebecca. She knows everything about the English language. If she says you don't make sense, you don't make sense, right? So I kind of was good at that, and I think it worked till about 10, 15, 20 people. We're now 70 people. We got people in different cities, different cities, different time zones, different departments. A couple years ago, we kind of went crazy. I call it our Studio 52 era. 52? Studio 54. There you go. 52 is something very different. Studio 54 era. And it was kind of like we went crazy, right? I mean, we kind of invested in 10 different areas. We brought on all these employees. And I started to dabble in like, okay, let's create an org chart to reflect all these new people. And I kind of stopped because I was like, this doesn't really make sense. And I was like, we don't need it. We'll kind of figure it out. I actually want to, like Allen and Company is an investment bank, and they'll kind of hire these people and they'll just give them a desk. And they're like, go create business, like just go create value, right? So I was like, let people come and we'll kind of figure it out. Mistakes, I've made a few. So what I should have done is actually call time out and say, Ash, if you can't draw up an organizational chart, there is a problem with the structure, not the people, but what you are trying to get these people to do. And I think because I'm a fairly diplomatic person and I kind of like empathize with people, I was able to, over the course of the ensuing 2 years, kind of maneuver and get everybody to play along. But then last year when I came back from vacation, my colleagues, our esteemed CFO, Chief Financial Officer, was like, and a few others, was like, here is the updated org chart. I opened it, my first reaction was, this is beautiful. All these colors, it's flat, it's amazing. But then I went home and I was like, that looked like I ate a box of Skittles, dropped acid, and vomited on a piece of paper. I've never done acid, by the way. And I was like, you have a problem. I was like, you've gone from having a very simple organization to having a very complicated organization. It's your fault. It's not fatal, but the fact that you can't create an org chart should speak volumes. So the answer is yes. And I knew I had to make some changes.
Right. Well, I mean, you could simplify any org chart to customer and employees, but...
It's funny you say that because in one of the many iterations of our org chart, I kind of had myself and two other pillars, like Office of the CEO, Finance and Admin, and Technology, as this kind of these three beams inside of a skyscrapers, kind of if you look at 3D, with like editorial, sales, and distribution that kind of leaned into, like we basically... I feel
like we need one of those.
We need something, yeah, but I'm sure they'll put snazzy graphics as well. So, and then what we had was then supporting all these other stakeholders, like everything including government, which is kind of excessive, but your community of viewers and your clients and all that. All in this process, like the education of an entrepreneur, that I had complicated the organization in our effort to really grow, which everybody does. You kind of very lean, scarcity, you have no resources, you start to have some success. After a while, you're like, hey, I should reinvest and go big. And I think it was kind of like, I realized that I needed to make some changes. And so the org chart does help you with that.
I mean, I guess we're kind of backtracking, but to you, what kind of greater purpose does the org chart serve?
Well, again, if you go back to my first point about a CEO, or in this case, like entrepreneur, founder, CEO, it's kind of very easy for you to not empathize with others and be like, well, we don't need this, but you do need it. You needed one for internal and external, users. I think internally, and titles, I view like in this case to your question, I will say org charts and titles. I think internally sometimes it's just like it's very clear if you have somebody that's in charge of like production versus some in terms of partnership, I think you're signaling something internally that, ooh, if there's a problem with A or B, go to the right people. But it's also externally, we have an employee that has one kind of umbrella of tasks. And because of just talent, skill set, expertise, they now have taken on a very different basket of tasks. These two things at face value are not really related. So when we had a discussion about how should your title kind of reflect that, I couldn't just disregard it and discount it and say, oh, you're crazy, you don't need it. I knew that like with this title, if you went and had a meeting, they would be like, why are you here? Are you here to discuss this? That makes no sense. So it's kind of like, I feel like there are internal messaging to new employees existing when there's a problem, when something slips through the cracks. We have a very good culture in that when shit happens, it's like hashtag live and learn. I'm always like, look, ultimately it's on me. Let's take blame, throw it outside the window. Let's now break down what actually went wrong. And I think an org chart helps figure out, oh, no wonder this unit doesn't speak to that unit. We got to fix that. And then externally, yeah, I think if you bring somebody in from the outside, whether it's like an analyst, a consultant, or a new employee, I think it's just like a navigation. It's like a map. It's basically a roadmap, a blueprint.
Right. What drawbacks would you say there are to org charts?
Well, so things do get very territorial. Things do get political. I think we've been very lucky to avoid that. But for me to say that in 2 years we didn't become more political and more territorial would be kind of naive. It's wrong. I think we went from having like 0 of that to having like on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Game of Thrones, 2. It's still very tepid. At many organizations, being a royal asshole to your colleagues is like what gets you more power, because you basically shit on your colleagues, and that's how you get more territory. It's horrible, and we've worked very hard not to have that at WatchMojo. I think the drawback of an org chart is you put it out on a table, and people's kind of greater good and sense of just decency and altruism goes out the window, and it's basically like risk. It's, shotgun, they jump on everything, because they want power, they want credit. That saying, success has many parents, failure is an orphan. So I think the problem is once you bring out the org chart, you actually get people fighting for power, even if they don't necessarily want the responsibilities that come with that.
Right.
So net, there are moments when I become more and more zen that I wish it was like the simple times when we were 10, 12 people. But growth, progress, these are parts of organizational development. And I love where we are now, but it was very naive of me 2 years ago to say, org charts, schmorg charts, we don't need them. That was probably a mistake of mine.
Fair enough, thank you. Let us know what you guys think about org charts, and if you want more, check out the link below. See you next time.